Good afternoon. We're going to discuss about writing and evaluating test items. For our objective, we are going to discuss the topics on item writing, item format, item analysis, which include item difficulty and item discriminability. Now, for item writing, there are guidelines mentioned by DeBellis for writing test items. Number one is to define clearly what you want to measure. To do this, use substantive theory as a guide and try to make items as specific as possible. In our class, we have experience. No, I have instructed you on how to find a theory that you're going to use a springboard for creating your items, because number two tells us to generate item pool. Now, theoretically, all items are randomly chosen from a universe of item content. In practice, however, care in selecting and developing items is valuable. Avoid redundant items. In the initial phases, you might want to write 3 or 4 items for each one that will eventually be used on test or scale. For the third guideline, avoid exceptionally long items which are rarely good. Now, for the fourth, keep the level of reading difficulty appropriate for the one who will complete the scale. So if you choose to write an item for a 5-year-old or most probably a 9-year-old child, you try to use words that are appropriate for them. Now, for number 5, avoid double-barreled items that convey 2 or more ideas at the same time. For example, consider an item that asks the respondent to agree or disagree with the statement, I vote Democratic because I support social programs. There are 2 different statements which the person could agree. And these are 2 ideas, like I vote Democratic and I support social programs. Now, you also need to consider mixing positively and negatively worded items, because this will tend for the participant or the test taker to agree with most items. No, so to avoid this bias, you can include items that are worded in an opposite direction. We also have item formats. The first is the dichotomous format, offers 2 alternative for each item. Let's say items that could be answered by true or false or yes or no. The polytomous format, it is also sometimes the polychotomous, resembles the dichotomous format except that each item has more than 2 alternatives. Now, incorrect choices are called distractors. Now, we also have multiple choice items. These are easy to score. And the probability of a correct response by chance is lower than it is for true or false items. Now, an advantage of this format is that it takes a little time for test takers to respond to a particular item because they don't have to write. The test can cover a large amount of information in a relatively short time. Now, we also have the Likert format developed by Likert. And this one is the most popular format for attitude and personality scale. We also have the category format, a technique that is similar in the Likert format that uses an even greater number of choices. Now, let us say giving a 10-point rating system. Let us say if you want to rate, someone would ask you, how would you rate your boyfriend from a scale of 1 to 10? 1 as the lowest and 10 as the highest. Now, in checklist and cue sorts, one format common in personality measurement is the adjective checklist. Now here, a subject receives a long list of adjectives and indicates whether each one is a characteristic of him or herself. Now, next topic would be item analysis. A general term for a set of methods used to evaluate test item is one of the most important aspects of test construction. The basic method involves assessment of item difficulty and item discriminability. Now, for item difficulty, it measures, this is being used for measures of achievement or ability. It is defined by the number of people who get a particular item correct. So here, the higher the proportion of people who get the item correct, the easier the item. How hard should the items be in a good test? Now, this depends on the uses of the test and the types of items. The first thing a test constructor needs to determine is the probability that an item could be answered correctly by a chance alone. Now, the optimum difficulty level for a 4-choice item is approximately 0.625. And we have several steps to do this. Step 1 is to find half of the difference between 100% success and the chance performance. And step 2 is to add this value to the probability of performing correctly by chance. And how do we do step 1? Say, for example, if you have the 100% minus the 0.25 probability, over 2. That would mean a 0.75 over 2 is 0.375. For step number 2, the chance performance is 0.25, and you add that in the midway point that we got from the formula from step 1. And you try to add this, and you will get an optimum item difficulty of 0.625. Now, a simpler method for obtaining the same result is the 1.02 chance performance and divide by 2. For this example, the result would be 0.625 also, no? And here is the formula, 0.25 plus 1.0 over 2. In most tests, the items should have a variety of difficulty levels because a good test discriminates as many levels. Item difficulty is the only one to evaluate test items. Another way is to determine the relationship between a particular performance on a particular test item and performance on the whole test. This is known as discriminability. Now, discriminability is determine whether the people who have done well on a particular item have also done well on the whole test. One can evaluate the discriminability of items in many ways. Now, first is the extreme group method. This method compares people who have done well with those who have done poorly on a test. Now, finding the proportion of people in each group who got item correct, the difference between this proportion is called the discrimination index. Now, here is an example of technical box 6.1, finding the item discrimination by using the extreme group score. And there are several steps to do this. No, here for the example, we have the item number 1 to 5, and you have the proportion of correct for students in the top third of a class, and then you have the proportion of correct for students in the bottom third of class. Now, let us say if you have 100 participants or test takers in a class for the upper group and 100 also for the lower group. And then this would mean 89 over 100 would be 0.89, and 34 who got the item correct for the lower group over 100 is 0.34. And then you try to divide the proportion from the upper group, which is 0.89 minus 0.34, and your answer would be 0.55. Okay, so we have here the indices of difficulty and discrimination. Now, based from the subtraction from the discrimination, you're going to get your answer, and the index for that. Let us say, for example, if you got or obtained a computation of 0.14 and below, that means that your item needs to be discriminated if you're looking into discrimination. Now here, let us say how are going to solve for index difficulty index for each item. Now I have read a book from Anastasia on psychological testing, and the way it was mentioned on the book is that you have to arrange the scores from highest to lowest. And then let us say there are 60 test takers or 60 test takers, and you have to get the 30% of that 60. That would be 18. And then you're going to get the students, no, from the top score, you count 18, and then from the lower, which will be your upper group, and then from the lower group, you also count 18. From the bottom student who got the lowest score, you count 18 from their upward, you know, and you count 18 students, and that would be your lower group. And then to get the proportion, all you have to do is try to divide the number of correct responses for the upper group. Let us say, for example, 15, and the total number of persons in the upper group is 18. Now, 15 over 18 will give you an answer of 0.83. Now, if in the lower group, if there are 6 who got the answer correctly on item number 1, and there is 18 total of students from that lower group, that would mean there is a proportion of how much? 6 over 18. 6 over 18 will give you an answer of 0.33. Now here you have to add, for this difficulty index, you have to add 0.83 plus 0.33 over 9, and that would give you the result of the index of difficulty. And then you use the table here. You use the table for the index of difficulty. Now, plus 0.83, that would give you an answer divided by 2. That will give you an answer of 41.66. If you're going to look at the index of difficulty, 0.41.66 will give you an index between 0.30 to 0.70, which means that the item is moderately difficult. Okay, so now let us go for the computation for the discrimination index, the same procedure. You need to count, let us say 30% of 30% of those who got the top score and the bottom score. No, so that would be 18 for the 60 total number of respondents. Again, you need to get the proportion for the upper and lower group, and you need to subtract over n. Now, after you get the answer for that, you're going to go back to the index of discrimination. No, so depending on what you got, no, your interpretation of that particular item, whether it is discarded, revised, it is a good item, or to be discarded, no, will depend on the index of discrimination. Okay, so that would be all. Thank you.